I'm Kate Holohan. I'm a USA Today best-selling author of domestic suspense books. I've published 4 titles and I have a 5th, Her 3 Lives, coming out in April from Grand Central Publishing, which is part of Hachette Publishing Group. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you all in person, but I still wanted to give my talk about my path to becoming an author, what's worked for me, and why I write crime fiction. So here it goes. Before I became an author, I was a journalist for many years, writing for the Record newspaper, the second largest daily in New Jersey, where I'm from, and then the Boston Globe, Business Week, and others. But I've always loved reading and writing fiction. Even when I was a journalist, I totally made up stories. Not for work, of course. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about the fake news media, but I swear I never worked for them. I wrote fiction after my day job, sharing facts. And I spent my days writing about reality, and then my nights, a lot of them, penning stories about whatever was keeping me from sleeping. Most of these tales were mysteries and domestic suspense stories, tales in which bad things happen to seemingly good people, and we have to figure out why. What went wrong? What mistakes were made that spiraled out of control? Who was responsible? All those deep, dark questions. All these deep, dark questions are basically problems, and problems create conflict. And conflict is drama, and drama is interesting. That's why crime fiction is so compelling, even if the writers sometimes get a bad rap. I know some people think I must be a very disturbed person to spend my day thinking about terrible things and why they happen. My dad, for example. I remember when I told him the premise of my first book. We were in my parents' living room after enjoying a pleasant family dinner. I was sitting on the edge of the couch holding my youngest, and my oldest was crawling around on the carpet, picking up toys, trying to jam them in her mouth. And my dad's there, and he's sitting in his rocking chair, gently tipping back and forth, surveying the whole scene in that content, grandfatherly way. He had the grandpa glow on his face. Any grandparents will know this look, and any parent would probably recognize it on their parents' own faces. It's this, satisfied, schadenfreude-filled smile that says, oh, my kids have kids, and they're finally going to experience everything I went through. And it's not my problem. So, my dad was there, enjoying my toddler taste testing the toys, and in between taking things out of her mouth, I'm trying to explain how excited I was that this book that I just sent off to my agent was finally complete. And I said, Dad, I think this could really be the one. I think this is the one getting published. And he's only half listening to me. He was busy looking at my beatific oldest with her cherubic little toy-filled cheeks. And I said, it's about a sociopathic child who has it out for her baby brother, but the only one who sees the truth is the au pair. So my father looks at me, he's like horrified. He says, you think anyone will read that? The answer, as it turned out, was no. Nobody was going to read that. Art is subjective, and rejection is part of this business. Writers can't get hung up on one story that isn't selling. We have to either change it or move on and write another one. So I did. I moved on and I altered the story so it involved the same themes as the prior tale, but had an older antagonist. My agent had wisely suggested I age up the villain to a teenager because, as she said from experience, everyone believes teenagers can be evil.
Can we drink a shot of tequila to the fact that teenagers are challenging?
So I switched the antagonist from middle school to high school, turning her into a gifted, amoral student in a competitive dance program. And my agent pitched the book as Black Swan meets the talented Mr. Ripley. And that became my first published novel, Dark Turns. My dad, I think, still thought the story too dark. He understood why people were reading it, but I don't think he could fathom why I'd chosen to write it. I remember him asking why I'd want to spend a full year between writing and promoting the book, talking and thinking about such awfulness. The question, I admit, it kind of confused me because I was a journalist, right? So I said, Dad, I've dedicated my entire life to writing about awful things. happening and why. Have you read the newspaper? I mean, mass shootings, school shootings, regular old domestic shootings, parents bribing their kids' way into elite universities, kids becoming learning disabled from poisoned drinking water, a kid murdered walking to a friend's house wearing a hoodie, a woman killed sleeping in her house after police get the address wrong. The world gets really, really dark, and it's full of really scary people and things. And at least in my fiction, I control the rules of the universe. And in my books, karma reigns supreme. Karma is the queen bee. And we all know what the B stands for. I write for that catharsis of seeing the sick ultimately get help and the selfish get their comeuppance. The violence stopped before they can do more damage. That's the beauty of writing crime stories. And I think that's why people read them. In 2018, crime novels overtook general fiction as the biggest selling genre worldwide. In the US, romance still edges it out a little bit. Wonder why? But crime fiction is near the top because people want to see the mystery solved. They want the guilty held responsible and the victims put in a place where they have the means, both financial and psychological, to move on. It satisfies a sense of justice that I think so many of us feel isn't sufficiently present in our real world. So often when terrible things happen, even when the perpetrator is caught, there really isn't a satisfying way to make the victims whole. I remember when I was a journalist and I was covering the $65 billion plus Ponzi scheme run by Bernie Madoff. Side note, Madoff? I mean, I still can't get over that name. I remember asking a news editor how to pronounce it, and he said, made off, like he made off with the people's money. If I named a villain that, my fiction editor would have rejected it. I swear. He'd be like, a little on the nose, Kate, don't you think? You're not Ian Fleming. You can't make the gold thief Goldfinger. You can't do that. Get out of here. Give him a different last name. But his name was Madoff, and though he'll be in prison probably for the rest of his life, there's no real justice for so many of his victims. I interviewed one investor, a woman named Phyllis Molchatsky. After working on Wall Street for decades as an office manager, she was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's and forced to stop working at the age of 55. She had a couple million saved for her retirement, which she invested with Madoff, and she had been given a recommendation to go with him from former colleagues. They basically said to her, hey, he has great returns and he's pretty consistent. You're not going to knock it out of the park, but he will be a conservative investor and take care of your retirement fund so that you can, make sure that you can take care of yourself, and also so that she could put her adopted son through college. I remember speaking with her in her lawyer's office in the city, and she was sitting in this chair in front of these massive bookcases filled with legal tomes, just, shaking. And she just kept repeating that it was all her money. And she didn't want to be a burden to her son. She said she'd adopted a child to make his life better, not to make someone take care of her. Phyllis's story stayed with me, and I don't know how much money she was able to recoup, but I just never felt like justice was really done, given all the people this man harmed. It couldn't be done because, even if Madoff died in jail, it wouldn't change what happened to these people. It wouldn't rectify their suffering, and it wouldn't put them in a place where they could easily move on with life. So I wrote a book, The Widower's Wife, which was a USA Today bestseller. And in it, there's an unscrupulous financial character and his largely unwitting wife. And I don't want to give away the ending, but for me, and I think for many people, it was satisfying in a way that real life so often is not. Because I tried to leave my victims in a position to rebuild. And so many real life victims don't have that opportunity. My husband works in finance, and he's no doubt relieved that I'm letting you all know that neither he nor his firm provided any inspiration for the villain in that book. It was all driven by my former reporting. My poor husband. Whenever I write a book with a shady male character that gets what he deserves, people naturally assume that he's behind it. And, he's not. He's not often used at all. I ask his advice. Hey, babe, could you picture like a jerky guy saying something this way? Or, rewind to like when you were in your 20s and you're dating and you really want a girl to like you. What's a line you might use? No, don't say I folded the kids' laundry. That only works with me, babe. My husband isn't the only one that worries I'll base character on him. I have good friends that will say, is anyone me? Did you write about me? And they laugh when they say it, but I can see the concerned crinkle between their brows and the smile that doesn't extend to their eyes. And I always tell them, of course not, no. To an extent, they're all me. In fact, I think that's true for most writers. Like every character, even those that are inspired maybe by other people or real events, are essentially them. It's the writer imagining how a person with certain life experiences would react to particular challenges. Basing characters whole hog on people, it's lazy, in my opinion. It's just much more interesting to do the research and create a person based on composites of people that have had similar life experiences to the individual you're attempting to invent. I believe very much in researching character and setting, and I really, really get into it. For my first published book, I wanted the setting to be this ultra competitive dance school. I'd never taken dance classes. Like learning the original Running Man and shaking my booty at bat mitzvahs was as much dancing as I did. But to put my amoral teenage overachiever under the kind of stress that might make her behave particularly badly, I wanted this setting. So I enrolled in a ballet school. There was a professional ballet studio in Edgewater, New Jersey, which wasn't far from my house at the time, and it catered to serious high school dancers and former professionals who were in their 40s, so a bit past their prime, but yet they wanted to keep dancing. And the studio was suffering a bit for money and enrollment, which is, I'm pretty sure, the only reason the director let me in. She was a former ballerina, probably in her 60s, and she had framed articles about her past shows on her walls. I met her enrolling my then 3-year-old in baby ballet class. The class had 4 little girls and room for about 20, which is how I guessed she might let me into the adult classes. I remember the first day. I entered the studio wearing a black leotard over black leggings and my hair in a low bun so I could continue to cover my elephantine unattached ears. I used to be ashamed of them, but now they hold up my glasses, so those are always good. But so I'm all ready, and I feel like I look like a ballerina. And I get in there, and she says, "Oh, I know why you're here." So, I thought that was kind of confusing because I hadn't told her that why I was there. I hadn't said, "Oh, I'm researching a book." So, I go, "Okay, sure. Like, why am I here?" And she says, You are a marshmallow." And she pats my stomach. "But don't worry. I can make you a rock." Now, normally, I would have been offended by someone calling me a marshmallow, but I was especially offended that day because, to be honest, I felt pretty good about myself. I'd lost the baby weight, I was fitting into my old skinny jeans, and isn't that how so many of us figure out that we're doing well if we can fit into the clothes that we had been unable to fit into before? But the truth was that compared to all the dancers in that class, I was definitely a marshmallow. Worse, I was a marshmallow that had been put in the freezer because I wasn't malleable or stretchy. I couldn't squish my body into one of those deep plies. I was just doughy and inflexible, and suddenly very, very intimidated. But I had a character to write, and I'm a writer. So I said, "Okay, yeah, you can make me a rock? Let's rock." I took those classes twice a week for a year, and the director even put me in the recital. The adults were supposed to do an impressive number after all the little kids went so that the little tykes would have something to aspire to. And she put me way in the back behind this one former ballerina who I'm pretty sure was pregnant at the time. I had a cell phone video that I considered splicing in here, but you can barely see me and you can't really hear the music over my husband's laughter. So, suffice it to say, I never became a rock. I became more like a sand dune, semi-hard and easily eroded. I liked ballet though, but what I liked most about it was speaking to many of the former professional dancers from my book. I asked them about life and training and friendships and what it was like to put your body through that, how they thought about food, how they thought about competition. And after Dark Turns was published, I did an interview for the blog of a dancer in the Royal Ballet of Flanders who also writes about dance. And she told me that I really got the ballet right, and she related to the story a lot. So that was wonderful for me. And that's what you want to hear as a writer. Not that, hey, is this character based on me? But wow, this person felt real, and they feel real to people that have gone through even similar experiences. They read that character and they think, I understand, I recognize that person. If I could give one piece of advice about fiction writing, I would say that it's do the research. Fiction writers have a responsibility to be honest about what we're writing about. We make up stories, but they involve professions that exist and people who often have been through some sort of test that is similar to what we're writing about. And we want it to feel real and be honest to the experiences that people have so that our readers can identify with our characters and never stop and go, that doesn't seem right. And that means you got to put in the work. You got to talk to people that have had experiences that are like what you think your characters are going to go through. You have to read nonfiction and memoirs and visit places where you're going to put your story. You can't always get a first-hand account of everything, but the internet is great for that. You can go on Google Maps and Google Earth and check out a place and walk through it as if you're actually there. You can go on chat groups when people are talking about certain kinds of experiences, and you can read the things that they've written that they want to share with others and use that not to steal from it, but to inform your writing. And it's really, we live in a great time now that the internet is right there at our fingertips, and it has so much information that people freely put out there about themselves and their experiences. People want to share. And when we create something, we want to make sure that what we're sharing is honest. Here's one little secret. One thing that I love to use as a resource is realtor websites and Zillow, because they post these beautiful spreads of these houses, and I can set a story in an entire house I've never been in, or an amalgamation of a few houses, which is great, because I can't always set them in my house. Although I did do that once. In The Widower's Wife, I had a character who dies on a dining room table. And the reason why this happens is because I had purchased this beautiful concrete dining room table that the store neglected to tell me was completely porous. And if you don't always have it covered and anything spills on it, that stain will just suck in there and become an indelible mark. And I love red wine, so the red wine would just be just there, just Lady Macbeth's blood stain. There'd be no out damn spot. It would never leave. And it was cathartic to use the table in the book, I have to say, because now when I look at it, I don't necessarily see all the things that could go wrong. I see this scene from my book that I really enjoyed, and I think, doesn't bother me as much. To any of my friends watching this video, don't worry, I won't set a story in your house, promise. To any celebrities that might ever stumble across it, I will totally set a story in your beautiful spaces, because they're available. They are often in magazines, and it's, oh, look at this celebrity's kitchen, and I can go, great, I'm going to absolutely use that. In One Little Secret, my fourth book, I'm pretty sure I might have said it in Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin's house. I like to think of it as I got it in their unconscious uncoupling. So yeah, but some of the rooms are different, I'm sure. I never really just take something in its entirety. One Little Secret is a book set in the Hamptons, and so there are a lot of these beautiful Hamptons homes. But that's just the setting. What it is really dealing with is the dark subject of domestic abuse and consent. And the book has a female detective that has to cope with all of that. To write her, I found a detective. I figured out which local town in northern New Jersey, where I live, had the most female detectives, and therefore might have someone willing to talk to me. And it turned out that this town, Bloomfield, had 2 female detectives. So I reached out and was in touch with a detective, Shauna Maldonado. And Detective Maldonado was kind enough to give me a tour of the station and show me the jails, and then sit with me for a few hours talking about what her average day looked like. And she told me stories about domestic violence calls and college sexual assault cases. And I didn't use any of her particular stories in my work, but what I did use was the way she talked about these cases and how much she grappled with trying to find out the truth when they often involved 2 conflicting stories. A boy says the girl was only tipsy, and she says she was blackout drunk, and how, as a police officer, do you navigate that? And so I really wanted to put that struggle and what that struggle does to someone in my character. And I think I did. If there's one thing you learn talking to police officers, it's that there's very rarely a clear bad guy and a clear good guy. I mean, sometimes there are, but a lot of times there's this gray. And I think that's important to remember as a writer. We can't have our antagonists just be evil for the sake of being evil. They have to have their own reasons that in their head satisfy some sort of morality, even if that morality is skewed, even if it's that I have to do this for my family even though it hurts somebody else, or I have to do this for myself because I only have one life to live and this is, I'm just out for me. But they have to have a life view where their actions are consistent with that life view and a way of justifying it. Doesn't mean it's right, but they have to have it in order for them to be believable. As far as morality goes, I do think that another reason why people like crime fiction is because a lot of our books have morals. They do. I mean, our antagonists might be bad guys that they don't have the right morals, or they don't really have a sense of morality that most of us would recognize. But the book as a whole has to have something to say that isn't just, this is who did it. And I think that at least the best books in our genre do. And I try to do that. It's important not to hit readers over the head with it. You are, at the end of the day, writers exist to entertain, and you want to entertain people, but it's even better if sometimes you can entertain people and also have something to say, have your characters have something to say about why the problems that they were going through are happening, are becoming more frequent, are a symptom of something that might be problematic in our society. And I think that's what allows certain books to stay with us. In my latest book, Her 3 Lives, I definitely tried to do that. The book has been called Gaslight Goes High Tech, and it tells the story of a family that must determine who the real enemy is after a brutal home invasion breaks their trust in each other. And while ultimately it's a mystery of who was responsible for this home invasion, there are messages in there about privacy and the damage caused by racial and gender stereotypes. Ultimately, I think it's a good story. I think it's an entertaining story, but I think that it also has something to say, and ideally that's what we all should, I think, be aiming for. So I hope I've entertained you with some of these anecdotes and some of this discussion about what I think about as a writer of crime fiction, and what I think makes good stories and what's important. Some of the questions that you always get at conferences are, how did you get your agent? I went to a pitch fest. That's how I got mine. I totally recommend them. I think like most industries, FaceTime means a lot. And if people can see you then and actually talk to you, they're more likely to spend some time with your novel and really try and see if it's something that they could sell. So I think that's there. And I wish I was there and I could get more questions from you, but hopefully next year we'll be in a little bit of a different world. I hope everyone is staying safe out there, making good choices that would never end up being fodder for a crime writer, and being healthy. Have a wonderful day, everyone.